Welcome back, everyone, to Issues of Faith. Our guest is David Young, Senior Minister with North Boulevard Church of Christ in Murfreesboro. He is writing a book and just gave a sermon series about how Christians are now a minority subjected to hostility. So what should Christians do about that? How do we respond to that? And so I wanted to ask, and I think you got this pushback when you even gave the talk. It's tough to say Christians. Some would push back on they're not a minority. Christians are not a minority. It's not like they're harassed or bullied or persecuted. They're millionaires that are in your congregation and that kind of thing. What about that pushback?
Well, the first thing to say is that, Christian's a broad term in the U.S. If you spoke about mainline Protestants and, that's definitely a minority, but evangelicals are now, I don't know the percentage, maybe less than 40% of the U.S. My guess is it was more like 25 or 30% of the U.S. And that is a minority. I'm a statistical minority. But a sort of a biblical view of things like sexual orientation, gender identity, our view of abortion and life, a biblical view of certain religious practices, whether or not they belong in the open marketplace or not. Those ideas are getting pushed on by those who are not Bible believing or evangelical Christians. I don't want to prejudice with the label. And so, it's not uncommon now to have Christian organizations booted off of college campuses. We have websites taken down. Vimeo has denied some Christian organizations opportunity to preach. YouTube has. Facebook takes them down. It's not uncommon for HR departments to come out and say, this is the kind of language we want you to use regardless of your religious faith. Pharmacists are being told that they have to prescribe, the abortion pill, use a simple language, regardless of their religious convictions. And in these ways, we're being bullied. But it's nothing like what Christians have experienced under Marxist regimes, North Korea or the Soviet Union or China or Cuba, or under the dimitude of a Muslim nation. And so we're in that place where we've lost the majority status and being a bit bullied, but it does seem to me that using the word persecution sure sounds exaggerated.
And so what in your opinion, what should they do? What should the pharmacist do? Or what should the person working at a corporation do?
Well, it took me 8 sermons to answer that question. so I don't know in 3 minutes that I can answer that.
Yeah, we might not even have that long. Yeah, that's tough. But I mean, yeah, what should, generally speaking, broadly speaking, I guess?
The first thing I would say is we should expect that the world is not going to be happy with all things Christian. Jesus was crucified not because he was Santa Claus. He was crucified because he took bold positions that were contrary to the people around him. So we should expect it. If we're going to be like Jesus, we're not going to fit in very well. I would say that we need to make sure that we've decided that, our faith in Jesus is more important than anything else in our lives. And then I think a good operating principle of Christians is found when Jesus says, be as wise as a snake, but be as gentle as a dove. What he's saying is, sometimes you have to navigate a difficult situation, but never lose your gentility, your love, your graciousness. And maybe that's a good operating principle for Christians, that there are going to be times we're going to have to say, no, I can't do that. I will not do that. But we must always operate with the grace and generosity that Jesus shows us.
And I could see how some might have heard what you said and thought, okay, that is a call to arms to get very active politically. And I'm going to go out and do this or that, or I can't believe my pastor is saying, my minister is saying, do this or that. Is it a call to arms to get active politically, or is it a call to arms to look at yourself introspectively?
Great question. I'll say that one of the stumbling blocks at my church was that people did hear it as a political call, though I make the case. When Paul says in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10, our battle is not against flesh and blood, but it is against the powers, authorities, principalities of this world. And then he calls us to a spiritual battle. So what I would say is politics matter. Listen, millions of people have died because of bad politics. Politics matter a lot. The culture wars are important, and they're fought over important issues. But as a believer in Jesus, to me, at the end of the day, it's always only a spiritual battle, which is to say, I want to release people from bondage. My enemy is my friend, and our common enemy is the one who would deceive us all. So I want to win people to Jesus. That's my number one goal. I can do that in any nation, under any political system, in any cultural environment. And if I can continue to focus on that, so what we've said is, if I can't preach it in Brazil, I'm not going to preach it in America. If I can't preach it in South Korea, I'm not going to preach it here. It needs to be the universal gospel and not an American gospel.
And I read somewhere, being in the minority can present opportunities. It forces you to be persuasive rather than demanding. When you try to be persuasive, you try to be attractive, and that makes you more effective. So is it, if we are Christians are in a minority, is it an opportunity? How do you deal with that opportunity?
I interviewed a lot of people for this, the book that became the sermon series that will one day be published, I hope. Several of the individuals I interviewed were older African Americans who grew up in the Jim Crow South. And the stories are heartbreaking, just weepy heartbreaking. But what you realize is the kind of strength that the members of that minority community developed, their own language, their own music, the envy of the world, their own art, their own social systems, that in so many ways it drew them close. They depended on one another. That's one reason why black churches are the strongest churches in America, because it drew them tight and drew them close. Maybe that lesson is now available for all Christians who feel like we're in a minority in the U.S. It's time to draw together, to sort of develop strategies for how to be what we have been called to be, and strengthen those strategies and stand together.
And we only have a couple minutes left. I read somewhere else, Christians who believe in God should be the least angry, the least anxious, the least fearful, because fear not appears in the Bible over and over. We know, God is in control, God wins, but it doesn't seem like many Christians are less fearful, less anxious. It seems like they're very anxious and very fearful.
I think you're right about that. So a lot of that is politics. So if you're a black American, you feel as though, 50 years of civil rights and we still can't be treated right in this country, and it raises anger. And I think for a lot of white conservatives, there's the sense that someone stole my country over the last 10 or 15 years. Where did my country go? And maybe the right answer for all of us is to join forces and say, you know what, together, let's work on applying Christian principles and make this the right place for everybody to the extent that we can. But I do think that being afraid, being fearful, responding in fear, of this rage, this anger is so unfitting for what at least I've been called to be as a follower of Jesus. It's just unbefitting a follower of Jesus.
In 30 seconds, the takeaway. Keep going. I love what you're saying there, but what do you want people to take away in 30 seconds?
Well, we clarify who we follow. When you're baptized, when you put your faith in Jesus, you've made a declaration. It wasn't a negotiation. It wasn't a dialogue. It was a confession that says, from this point forward, I follow Jesus. And that means when times are good, but it also means when times are difficult. I think the Christian faith had a vacation from hardship in the U.S. for decades. The vacation's over, and let's remind ourselves of who we follow. Let's be faithful, let's practice truth, and let's practice enormous grace.
Well, David Young, Senior Minister at North Boulevard Church of Christ in Murfreesboro, thank you for being with us. And thanks to everyone for watching Issues of Faith. Have a great day, everybody.